All right. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully your day's going well. It is Wednesday, and I got to be honest with you. I'm a little pissed off right now. Not at anybody but myself. That's it. I'm pissed off with myself. I already recorded the podcast. The video is done, but when I played it back, there was no audio, zero audio. And it's hard to have a podcast if you have no audio. And I'm trying to think what kind of technical catastrophe could have happened. Had to be something wrong with the equipment. That's the only answer it could have been. So I did some digging around, try to figure out why I have an entire podcast with no audio. And then I figured it out. My fucking fault. I have a microphone here. It's a good microphone. This microphone has an on-off switch on it, which I hate on microphones. I don't like microphones with on-off switches. It's just not something I'm used to using. Well, anyways, this one does. Same microphone I used yesterday and the day before and such. So I don't know why it was a problem, but the microphone switch was off. So I'm sitting here recording the podcast, doing my due diligence, trying to figure out what the fuck is going on and trying to do a podcast. I do the podcast, but no audio. So what do I do with that? I say, fuck it. Maybe I just won't do one. It's early in the morning. It's 1 a.m. Eastern time. I don't want to do this whole goddamn thing over again, but I made a commitment. I said I'd do a podcast every day. I've done a podcast every day. So my only other option is to redo it. Now, the problem with redoing it is, all the structure, the notes I made and everything, of course, I got rid of. When I finished, I figured, well, I don't need this shit. I'll just get rid of it. So now I've got to do the podcast kind of based on what I did before, but with no guidelines really. So what that means is I got to kind of wing it a little bit. Now, that's not really a problem. One of the things I can do is I can talk a lot, not necessarily all quality, but I can talk a lot and I can kill some time. So the hard part here is going to be able to take what I normally can do and talk for a long time or an extended period of time and still come up with something of value for you to listen to. That's going to be the trick. I think I can do it. It won't be quite as organized as what the first podcast was, but we'll get through it. Fuck it. I'm making the effort here. I'm trying. And we'll get through this goddamn thing. And I'm so annoyed that this is what happens here. So anyway, we're doing the podcast again. We've got a few emails. Of course, we had a big night last night with the second night of the Democratic National Convention. And it was a big night. We had Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband, speak. And I was really excited to see him because I didn't know much about him at all. Everybody said he's a fun, nice guy. He's got a sense of humor and all that, but I'd never heard him talk. Well, I watched him last night, and he was every bit that everybody said he was. He was a congenial, uh, decent guy. He seems to care for his wife, Kamala Harris. He has a lot of respect for her, and he gave a wonderful speech. And that was good to hear. It was also a big night because the Democratic stars, Barack and Michelle Obama, both spoke. And that was kind of interesting. It was good to see them there supporting Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party. It means a lot. A lot of people have a lot of respect for the Obamas, as well they should. They had 8 years as president and first lady, and they did a wonderful job. We can only wish that Kamala Harris does the same sort of thing over the next 8 years that the Obamas did. And I'm still dealing with this fucking cold. It's much better now, so I should have an easier time, but doing the podcast twice doesn't help the matter much. Anyway, they spoke, and they spoke strongly out against Donald Trump and supportive of Kamala Harris, as you might expect. What was interesting, prior to the Obamas speaking, somebody asked Donald Trump about the Obamas. Now, we know his history in talking about the Obamas, But in this particular case, he says, well, I like Barack Obama. I respect him. Really, Donnie? Is that why you did the birther shit and talked all the shit about Michelle and Barack Obama? I have a hard time believing that you have respect for the Obamas, the way you've talked about them in the past. And now that you are getting people around you to say, you got to tone it down a little bit. You've already done what you've done. We know who the fuck you are. You can't change stripes at this late point. Anyway, the convention the second night was excellent. In fact, they took the roll, and each state said, the great state of whatever, we have this many votes for the next president of the United States, Kamala Harris. And I found it interesting that the state of Georgia, the state I'm in right now, um, gave their response with the help of rapper Little John. And he came out and did a song, a variation on a song he did, and tied in Kamala Harris's name and Tim Walls's name. That was kind of cool. It was kind of cool to see that happen. So it was a great night for the convention. I know a lot of people loved it. You know, the thing about the convention is, as I've said in a TikTok, it's very motivational, it's very inspirational, and it's very emotional. A lot of people get up in their feels in this convention. There's a lot of talk about Joe Biden, who spoke the night before. There's a lot of love for Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and Joe Biden, and all the people that spoke for him. Um, and it's hard not to get a little teary eyed at some point. I mean, when you look at Joe Biden, he's coming to an end of an incredible era, 52 years in politics. He became a senator when he was 29 years old in 1972. And over those years, he's done a lot of good. And over the past 4 years, he's done what some people say may be the greatest performance of a president, certainly in my lifetime, maybe in the history of this country. We owe a lot of appreciation to Joe Biden, and people are starting to show that appreciation. Um, and it's all due Joe Biden. Joe Biden will go down as one of the greatest in history, not only for what he's done when he's president, but what he did as a vice president, what he did as a senator, and when he made the selfless move to step aside and let Kamala Harris take over. It's a very exciting time. And excuse me, swallowed something wrong. All right. It's a fucking cold. I hate having a cold. Anyway, what struck me about what's going on there, and somebody's going to mention it in the emails, I believe, the irritation with some of the Democrats, the better known Democrats, who asked Joe Biden to step aside and now are treating him like he's beloved. That's a certain amount of disingenuous. And it's kind of annoying. I'm not going to forget about what they did. Here's a guy that's been a friend of yours and a colleague for decades, and you have the audacity to tell him to step aside, and then you say, what a wonderful guy he is. Sorry, I don't necessarily buy into or believe everything you're saying when you talk like that. We got some emails. First one comes from the Z-Man. He says, hey, Boomer and Boomer Brigade, greetings from Bucharest, where we are visiting family. I haven't written in a while because it was time to be quiet, listen, and learn. It is incredibly amazing what has happened. The tide has turned. Here in Romania, people are very relaxed and are very pro-American and anti-Trump. They are happy about the turn of events in the Ukraine. There's a lot we focus on, but I've noticed something in right-wing media and social media. They're now calling Kamala Harris a communist. These are the same people who were blaming Biden for the corporate price gouging and has not ceased since COVID. Oh, we have rough times living paycheck to paycheck because of inflation Joe caused. Now that Kamala has a plan to go after pricing and the price gouging of the corporations, she's a communist, pure projection. These people are the ones who have consistently voted Republican, who cleared the path for corporations to monopolize the market. They praise Putin and Russia. Trump praised both Xi and Kim, and Xi's the communist. As Ed said recently, if the Cold War was still on, the FBI would have to investigate Trump and the entire party by now. It's time we put our boots on their neck and not give them a break and finish them. Then make sure we get what we want from the Democrats. I've been listening to you every day here, Mike. From what I hear from other podcasters, some well known, it appears they've been listening to you too. Keep kicking MAGA ass, Z-Man. Well, I don't know if other podcasters are listening. From time to time, I see some TikToks that mention similar things and similar point of views as to what I do, and I don't have a problem with that. If it's good information, if it's truthful information, God bless them. I want to hear that kind of information getting out, regardless of who it comes from and how they got it. I will say this, Z-Man, you and I agree on this completely. I've said before that we have the Republicans on the run now. We most certainly have them on the run. And now is not the time to let up. We've got to keep hammering it home. We've got to put them down and put them down for good. Because Republicans are a lot like cancer. You leave one little speck and it can um, uh, grow and get worse and come back again. We've got to end this now and end it once and for all. So I'm hoping that the Democrats do that. And you're absolutely right. Once this is all said and done, we have to stay on top of the Democrats to make sure that they come through with all the things they promised. I've said this before. I worry about politicians in general, not specifically the Democrats, but they'll say what they say to get elected. And if the Democrats come out of this with a president, a majority in the House, and a majority in the Senate, it's conceivable they could get lazy. Well, we won. Now we can just relax. I don't know for sure that they're going to do that, but that's distinctly possible. I mean, remember, they could have codified Roe v. Wade a number of times and they never did it. They didn't think they'd need to. So it's going to be important for us. Since all this happened with Donald Trump, the people of this country have become more aware of what's going on. And because they become more aware of what's going on and they're appalled by some of the horrific things that are happening in our government, people are starting to speak out. And this is good news. We are in this position because we were apathetic. We just let it ride and let the government do and the politicians do what they wanted to do, assuming they'd do the right thing. Well, we quickly found out in the years of Donald Trump and the ensuing years during the Biden administration that politicians, mostly Republicans, but politicians in general, don't always do the right thing. They do the thing that's most expedient to themselves. And this is Democrats too. So it's going to be important. We need to put the Republicans down. We need to get rid of them. We need to eradicate them. And then we need to put the pressure on the Democrats. I've always said this isn't a fight between the Democrats and the Republicans. This is a fight between politicians and we, the people. For too many years, they've taken from us and given to the rich, and that's Democrats too. And we've got to turn that around. If you listen to the Democrats, it sounds like that's exactly what they want to do, but they still have yet to do it. We need Kamala to win. We need to get majority in the House and in the Senate, and then we need to get to fucking work. We need to make sure the Democrats get to work and do exactly what they said they were going to do. Now, there's motivation for them to do that because once the MAGA fucks and the Republicans are pushed aside, if the Democrats can do the things they want to do, and they do good things for the middle class, then they can hold on to their positions come the midterms or the second term for Kamala Harris. Hopefully, they have enough foresight to understand that, and that's what they'll do. But we'll see. That's why, even if the election goes exactly the way we want it, Our work is not done. We still got to keep pushing. All right, this next one comes from Mary. She says, Boomer, is this true? Is Trump talking to Benjamin Netanyahu to stop the ceasefire because it may help Kamala, or is it AI? Well, I don't know what he's talking to Netanyahu about, but we know Donald Trump did talk to Benjamin Netanyahu. When he was in America, he also went down to Mar-a-Lago and had a meeting with Donald Trump. Is it conceivable that Donald Trump suggested to him that he should hold off um, the ceasefire because it might be good for Biden and or Kamala? Yeah, that's distinctly possible. That sounds exactly like Donald Trump would say. But did he? I don't know. And does he need to? I don't think he needs to. I think Benjamin Netanyahu has all the reasons in the world to not sign a ceasefire. You see, Benjamin Netanyahu is in a lot of trouble. Once the war is over, he's likely to be kicked out of his job. He's already been convicted of crimes and he's likely to go to jail. So he has every reason to maintain this war. He doesn't really care about the collateral damage in the people in Gaza or even in Israel. He's trying to save his ass. Does he need Donald Trump to tell him to do that? No. Because frankly, Benjamin Netanyahu is a fraternal twin of Donald Trump. He is to Israel as Donald Trump was to America. Benjamin Netanyahu is a problem. Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's these two entities that are fighting, and the people in Gaza and the Israelis that have been injured or killed are little more than collateral damage. These are prices that these clowns will allow to be paid just to benefit themselves. And that's the sad thing about this. All right, next up, Eric. He says, as I watched the DNC stream, I had mixed feelings. While I think the admiration of Joe Biden was real, I couldn't help but get angry by it. Jesus Christ, if these people had shown this level of support for Joe after the debate, he'd still be in the race. I was listening to MSNBC and later the NBC coverage. The reporters kept mentioning how this was supposed to be Joe's convention. The media is most of the reason why it isn't his convention. I don't know why, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Joe was going to announce his retirement. I don't know if that was because of the tone of the night. I was glad to hear Joe's speech where he said he's not done fighting for America and will use his remaining time to get things done. Watching the ceremonial roll was inspiring. I had a feeling from each state that they believed that any state could be winnable. Several states like Idaho mentioned that they had Democrats running in every contest. It's leaving me even more confident that we're on the verge of a landslide. We are going to see seats flip blue that haven't flipped in a generation or more. Thanks, Eric. And Eric brings up what I was talking about earlier. It is kind of frustrating to see the likes of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi speaking fondly of Joe Biden. Now, understand these people have been friends and colleagues of Donald or of Joe Biden for decades. And I'm sure Joe Biden is upset by the fact that after performing quite well as president of the United States, maybe better than any president in history, that these people would have they'd be disingenuine to the point where they'd say, you got to step aside, Joe. That seems like a betrayal to me. No question, it seems like a betrayal. Um, and the telling thing about this is people have asked Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi if, in fact, they've spoken to Joe Biden since he stepped aside. And the interesting thing is they have not, which is unusual. You would think they would have for somebody who's been as close to Joe Biden as they have, but they have not talked to him. And I would think that Joe Biden is probably a little angry at this point. I would think that He's hurt by it, and he has every right to be hurt by that. Um, will they get back together? Will they talk again? Probably. They will probably do that. But Joe has a right to be angry at this point. He did the right thing. He did the best thing for the country. And that's the hard part of this. I always thought that Joe Biden should not step aside. I thought that Joe Biden would beat Donald Trump, not so much because he was the more popular candidate, just by virtue of the fact that Donald Trump is such a horrible candidate and he has so much baggage, overturning Roe v. Wade and things like that. How can you win when you take constitutional rights away from 50% of the country and piss off 75% of the country? That coupled with all the other things he's got going against him, 34 felony convictions. I thought Joe Biden would win. Joe Biden steps aside. Kamala Harris gets it. And I always thought she was the only choice, in spite of the fact that maybe a lot of Democrats wanted to jump over her and get somebody else. I thought that would have been a horrible mistake. It would have irritated people of color. It would have shown a bit of racism. But then Joe Biden did the right thing and he endorsed Kamala Harris. He basically said, if I'm fucking leaving, we're doing it my way. And that was the right thing to do. And as luck would have it, Kamala gets the endorsement, and then all of a sudden her support explodes. Now, all these people that wanted to jump over Kamala Harris are in a bad spot because they can't. We've got this momentum going that nobody can stop, including Chuck Schumer, including Nancy Pelosi, and anybody else that wanted somebody other than Kamala. So they just got on the train and said, yeah, we love Kamala. Do they love Kamala? I don't know, but it doesn't matter because all they care about is winning. And frankly, at this point, I've said all along, I don't care how it happens as long as we win. This is an important thing in our history. If our country doesn't elect Kamala Harris and instead elects Donald Trump, we're fucked. We're in a bad situation. So I'm happy the way it turned out. I'm not happy the way it happened. I'm glad that Joe Biden endorsed Kamala Harris. I'm glad that this big surge of momentum is working for Kamala Harris. And I think we even have a better chance of winning in November than we did with Joe Biden. I think we win either way. But as I said, it was more about Donald Trump at that point when he was going up against Joe Biden. Um, I think that just based on how bad Donald Trump is, he would have lost the race. But now you couple that with the baggage that he has, and you couple it with a very, very popular candidate. When you put those two things together, I don't know how you can suggest that it's not going to be a decisive win, if not a landslide. I know what the polls say. I don't trust the polls, whether they're positive or negative for Kamala Harris. Whether it's something I like to hear or not, I don't trust them because it makes no sense. With all the things working against Donald Trump, with him stepping in it every time he opens his mouth, how does he stay close to Kamala Harris, especially when she's so popular? I don't see how that's possible. It doesn't make any sense. And in spite of what the polls say, I think it's going to be a big win for the Democrats. And I also think it's going to impact the down ballot too. I think it's going to impact the House of Representatives. I think a lot of people already believe that um, the Democrats could gain as many as 30 seats in the House of Representatives. People always talk cautiously about the Senate. Well, I'm not sure if we can win. I'm not sure they can lose because one of the reasons why Donald Trump won't win, among many reasons, is overturning Roe v. Wade. Well, he's not the only one supporting a national abortion ban or overturning Roe v. Wade. It's those senators as well, the Ted Cruzes, the Rick Scotts, and people like that. So, how do they win if Donald Trump loses? That makes no sense. Then we hear about the possibility of Florida flipping, Texas flipping, Ohio flipping. If they all flip or one of them flips, things are going to change in the Senate. I don't necessarily buy that it's going to be close. I don't even think it's going to be close amongst the down ballot people, the senators and the like. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how it works out. But I honestly believe that it's going to be a big win for the Democrats. And I'm not just hoping against hope here. I'm looking at the facts. You've never had a worse candidate for president than Donald Trump. You've never had a more popular candidate for president than Kamala Harris. Put those two things together. What else could it fucking be? It's got to go that way. It just has to. And I'm excited for it because I know when it comes to November 5th, there are going to be a lot of Republicans with their mouths agape and their least impressive appendage in their hands. They're going to say, "What the fuck happened?" And that's what needs to happen. We need that kind of closure. We need that kind of decisive win. It's not going to be enough for Kamala to win. She needs to win big. There has to be a mandate. There has to be a message sent to the Republicans that this MAGA shit ain't working. It's got to stop. And it's got to stop now. So I got my fingers crossed, but I feel pretty confident given all that's going on. You can't tell me it's not going to be a big win because everything points to it being a big win. All right. We are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. This is me winging this shit. As I told you early on in this podcast, I'd already recorded a podcast. I was done. I was in good shape. I was going to go to bed. But then I played it back and there was no audio. And there was no audio because I fucked up. There's no other way to look at it. So here we are doing a second podcast. This has only happened one or two times before, and I find it annoying every time I do it because it's my fault. It's my fault. And I guess it makes sense that I have to pay the price for it. Hopefully, you don't pay the price for it. And what I mean by that is that the first podcast was a typical podcast that I would normally do. This one is less organized. This one is less uniform than I would normally do it. So hopefully you can get as much out of this podcast as I did in the first one, because the first one was fucking brilliant. Not really. It was okay. But I'm doing it again now, and I'm doing it to the best of my recollection. As I told you, I had it all laid out on paper or on the computer. And of course, when I ended the recording, I just threw that out, not to be recouped in any way. So I couldn't go back and grab what I did and just redo the whole thing. So I'm doing it kind of off the cuff. So just bear with me here. Tomorrow, hopefully, we have Old Soul on and we can get back to normal, but we'll try to get through this. You know, I've said many times before about the polls. I don't trust them, whether they're positive polls for Kamala Harris or negative polls. They just don't make a lot of sense to me. Um, they're supposed to determine support, and I just don't buy into the polls in any way. I've always said that I think fundraising is more of an example of support for a candidate. It only makes sense that people actually go in their pockets, pull out their money, their hard-earned money, and give it to a candidate. That to me seems to be the essence of support. I said that about Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I can now say it about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris obliterated Republican Donald Trump in July fundraising, with her presidential campaign raising more than $204 million, more than 4 times her opponent's haul for the month. And that's according to new federal records. This isn't just talk. This is actually records from the federal government that prove it. So Trump's presidential campaign committee raised about $47.5 million during July, according to the documents. Even by contemporary political standards, where general election presidential candidates are expected to raise tens of millions of dollars every month. Harris's total is extraordinarily large, fueled by the interest and energy from her campaign. It's unprecedented. We haven't seen anything like this. That's why when people tell us how it's all going to go, they don't know. They've never seen this before. Um, Now, this extra cash is going to be helpful. In fact, the number that's being put out there that she has apparently raised in less than a month that she's been the candidate is close to $500 million, quite a bit more than Donald Trump. And the interesting thing about that money she got maybe 2/3 of it from small donors and a lot of first time donors. Now, money's money. And if Donald Trump got $1 billion from two donors and Kamala Harris got $500 million from hundreds of thousands of donors, you can see where the discrepancy is. Those small donors all equate into a vote. Two big donors for Donald Trump don't equate into a lot of votes. And that's the bottom line here. Money's good, but you need the votes to fucking win. And Kamala Harris is winning the fundraising side of it decidedly, much like I've talked about with regards to the election, why I think she will win decidedly. The support is there. The problems for Donald Trump continue. And so and here's the thing you have to understand about Kamala Harris too. She raised $500 million. There's only 2.5 months left in the campaign. That's a lot of money to spend in 2.5 months. She's going to be able to do all kinds of advertising, do all kinds of campaign rallies. In fact, last night when the convention is going on, while that's going on, she and Tim Walz went to Milwaukee to have another campaign rally. She did kind of show up in the convention because via video, she spoke to the crowd in Chicago. But they're out there hustling, they're out there working, they have the money to do it, and they're going to keep continuing to hit this hard. So she's in the driver's seat here. She's winning this one by a long shot. And I think it ultimately does equate into winning the election. I mean, we know money is a big part of all elections, as much as we don't like it now. It is working in the favor of Kamala Harris. And, it's interesting to see the support she has. And to me, that is that's essentially what support is all about. And she's got it in spades. I think the money will continue to flow in between now and November. She will have more than enough money. And keep in mind, any money that Donald Trump gets, a large percentage of it ends up going to legal fees. He's got a lot of legal problems here. So he's not going to be able to spend nearly as much money as Kamala Harris does in the campaign, whether it be campaign rallies or advertising or what have you. And that does have an impact on the ultimate election. She will be the face and the name that people hear most of. Donald Trump will have the problems he's continuing with. Of course, he's going to be sentenced in his Manhattan District trial, where he was convicted of 34 felonies. That's coming up September 18th. There is hopes that there is going to be a debate on September 10th. That's going to be interesting to see if that happens. Donald Trump is acting like he wants to do it. And I guarantee you, he does not want to do it. The people around him don't want him doing it because they know how it's all going to end up. But he's caught between a rock and a hard place. He needs the attention. He needs to do something with Kamala Harris because everything he's doing is not working. So he needs to do the debate. He needs to take that risk, and that is not a good risk for him to take. But he has no choice. So I think ultimately he will end up going to the debate and he will get absolutely destroyed. There is no comparison between the two of them. They uh, they aren't even close. She's a prosecutor, he's a criminal, and she will decimate him. So I'm looking forward to that. And all of that will add to the momentum she has in this campaign, not to mention the momentum she's getting off this particular convention. It's going quite well. The first day was a smash, the second day was a smash, and who knows what else is coming in the ensuing 2 days, today and tomorrow. And it'll be interesting to see how it impacts the polls at that point. In spite of the fact that I don't trust the polls. I know Donald Trump is freaked out about the polls. He's suggesting the polls are fake now. He loves the polls when they're working in his favor, but when they go against him, they're clearly fake. They're clearly fake. Now, one of the guys that was up for vice presidential nominee was Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Now he was on Fox and Friends. I love how that guy shows up on Fox all the time and just tears them apart. And they keep having him back. I don't know what it's for. But he was on Fox and Friends, host Lawrence Jones, and they were talking about violent crime and gun safety on Tuesday. Why the transportation director is talking about that, don't know, but there he was. The secretary appeared on the conservative network Tuesday morning from Chicago to defend President Joe Biden's record after Jones challenged him, saying violent crime was up nearly 10% across 66 major cities. Um, and he said, well, certainly the Biden Harris record for bringing crime down compared to why crime went up under Donald Trump. And I often wondered whether viewers of this network are aware that violent crime went up under Donald Trump. This is what Buttigieg said. I think that deserves more coverage so we can ask ourselves why. And some of that has to do with policy, some of that has to do with the message we send. When you have Donald Trump, an unrepentant, convicted criminal, running against a prosecutor like Kamala Harris, we have an opportunity to send a message about whether we're serious on law and order in this country or whether it's a talking point or whether it's just something people try to use as a political theme for partisan gain. You want to talk about inflation? Inflation went up in every country after COVID. We brought inflation down in this country. Like I say, why does Fox keep having him on? He just destroys them. He goes on to say every election is about the future, right? As Jones tried to cut in. In the future, economists predicts the Trump plan will increase the cost for American families by $3,900. So why would we go back to somebody who's going to make it worse? Jones said he'd been covering crime and inflation for years, and he said he'd spoken with Black Americans who were upset with the Democratic Party because many cities have been plagued by crime, especially gun violence. Um, Jones says, you guys sent the cavalry in for you guys for protection, but the people of Chicago don't see that on a day-to-day basis. What are you guys going to do to stop the bloodshed in communities? Buttigieg pointed out that he'd been mayor of South Bend, Indiana, which faces similar issues with crime. And he said the most heartbreaking part of the job was trying to comfort mothers whose children had been killed by gun violence. The big question, the big question for politics, for policy, for media is who's going to help them versus who's going to use them, Buttigieg said. The questions he's asking are exact questions that any citizen should be asking. Jones was taken aback, asking whether Buttigieg believes he was exploiting the mother he quoted to challenge the Democratic record on crime. I'm saying the mother is asking the exact right question, and the question is, what are you going to actually do when you come into office? The two talked over one another as Jones demanded specific policies Democrats had enacted to reduce gun violence. And Buttigieg reminded the Fox News host that the vast majority of Americans, including substantial majorities of Republicans, favored gun safety legislation that the GOP lawmakers oppose. Donald Trump says no. The Republican Party says no, Buttigieg said. Talk about assault weapons, something that made a difference when the assault weapons ban contributed to a reduction in crime. I remember coming to Chicago as a kid, and by the way, even though some media only want to talk about the worst and most painful things that go on in our cities, Chicago is a proud city. Chicago is an extraordinary city. But I do remember coming here when crime and murder was off the charts. And we've talked about that before. Buttigieg praised the work that went on to bring those crime rates down, saying it was still underway. And Jones pointed out that more than 20 people were shot in the city last week. Then Buttigieg said, then why would we elect leaders who won't do anything about gun violence? And Jones asked him to name one Republican in charge in Chicago. And Buttigieg replied, whoa, listen to me. Not only did we have those levels of crime under Democratic and Republican leaders, but if you'll try to cherry pick this for partisan purposes, you want to play that game? So is the case in Boston, where there is a much lower murder rate and also a Democratic mayor. We could talk about the murder rate in Mississippi being doubled what it is in Illinois. Now, I could go around saying that the murder rate in Mississippi being doubled what is in Illinois because Mississippi has a Republican governor and Illinois has a Democratic governor. But you and I both know that it doesn't work that way. The thing about um, the thing about them always going to Chicago and saying, "Well, we have this horrible violence and these killings in Illinois or Chicago specifically." That's true. You do have a lot of crime there, but again, it's about guns. And while Chicago does have a pretty stringent gun law, uh, you don't need to buy the guns in Illinois. You can go to Indiana right next door and buy as many guns as you want and do whatever you want and travel to Illinois. This isn't about the cities. This is about a national problem of guns. And we know the Republicans support anybody who wants a gun to have a gun. And those guns get traded around and people die every day. As a mayor of a city, you only have so much that you can do. If guns are coming in illegally, which they are, what do you do to stop that? I mean, of course, you have police officers, and you try to bring law and order to your city, but it's impossible when these things are pouring into your communities. And that's the one thing the Republicans always forget, that it's not just the communities, it's the whole attitude of guns in this country. The vast majority of the people in this country want decent gun laws. The Republicans do not. The Republicans do everything they can to keep guns free and easy to have. We did have an assault weapons ban at one point, and those kinds of crimes did go down. But then, of course, that was taken off, and of course, they jump back up again. This isn't a hard question. This isn't a difficult question to answer. If you have too many guns, there's going to be violence. If you can kind of control those guns, well, then things are going to be better. The Republicans don't want to hear that, though. They want to blame the Democrats for something that isn't their fault and project this problem onto Democrats as opposed to accepting the responsibility for the problem with guns in this country. It's absolutely amazing to me that they constantly project this way. They disregard the actual issue at hand and then they try to blame the Democrats. This is the whole strategy of the Republican Party. They have no policies, they have no plans to fix anything. All they want to do is try to dismiss, discredit, or disgrace their opponents. They did it to Joe Biden, they did it to Hillary Clinton, they did it to Barack Obama. And now they're trying to do it to Kamala Harris. The only difference is all their crimes and corruption have been exposed. We all know what they're responsible for and what they've done to this country. They can try to project all they want, but it's not going to work. It's just not going to work for them anymore. And they understand the problem they have here. They're still going to double down and try to pull the same bullshit that they always do, but it's not working this time. People are too well informed. There's too many people talking about the problems that are going on in this country and how the Republicans refuse to do anything. I mean, we come up to this election, and if you're a Republican running for the House of Representatives, all the Democratic opponent has to say is, so the last 2 years, when you had the majority in the House of Representatives, what did you accomplish? And they accomplished nothing. How do they sell themselves as somebody who's representing the public when they get absolutely nothing accomplished? This is going to work against them when it comes to the election coming up. So we'll see how it works for them. But there's always going to be somebody blaming violent crime on Democrats when they continue to espouse the idea of having free and easy guns for anybody, absolutely anybody to get. All right, here's some. It's not great news, but primaries in Florida dealt a blow to Kevin McCarthy's revenge tour against the Republicans who voted to oust him last year. Teed up a potential sleeper Senate race between Rick Scott and former Rep. Debbie Mucarsel Powell. Votes were also cast in Alaska and Wyoming primaries to set key November matchups in the battle for control of Congress. The contest came as thousands of Democrats gathered in Chicago for the convention, as we know. Here's some bad news. Matt Gaetz, a Republican from Florida in the House of Representatives, he fended off a primary challenger in the latest race to put a spotlight on tensions within the House GOP after McCarthy was kicked out. It's hard to imagine a guy with a track record and a history and criminal background, Matt Gaetz, wins the primary. The fuck is wrong with people in Florida? Jesus Christ. Gaetz beat Aaron Dimmock, a retired naval officer and political newcomer supported by McCarthy and his allies in the GOP race for his seat in Florida's 1st congressional district. Dimmock told The Hill ahead of the primary that he's never spoken to the ex-speaker, but he ran on Tuesday with McCarthy's backing and more than $3 million in support from a super PAC with ties to McCarthy's orbit. So McCarthy tried to do whatever he could to get Matt Gaetz kicked out and get him to lose in the primary, but to no avail. There's no accounting for Florida voters. Somehow they think Matt Gaetz is the guy to lead them into the next 2 years in the House of Representatives. It'll be interesting to see what the Democrats do to him. I don't know that there's much we can do with the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene or even somebody like Matt Gaetz. Their districts are their districts, and they voted them in the first place, so they aren't the brightest crowd of people. They are buying the bullshit, and they'll probably still uh, elect them for their primaries at least, and conceivably in the general election. What are you going to do? All you can do is win the ones that you're going to win and hope to God you can somehow neutralize the likes of Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, I'm not sure how she's going to do. I don't think she's faring very well at this point. I think she's in trouble in Colorado, but even then, who knows? Who knows what the hell is going to happen with her? And I'm not all that worried about them staying, the Matt Gaetzes, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, and the like. Because think of it this way: these people are ineffective anyway. And if you put them in a situation where they're no longer in the majority, they aren't going to do much at all. Are we not better off with ineffective, incompetent people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz when the Democrats have a majority? Aren't we better off having them in there as opposed to formidable candidates, Republicans that can actually get something done, that have some wherewithal? I don't know. I'm not as worried about them coming in or staying in. I think it's a distinct possibility. Um, I think some people don't learn lessons. I think they just do what they do. They're Republicans. They're going to vote for a Republican, no matter how shitty that Republican is. So we'll see what happens with it. I still think that with regards to the House of Representatives, the Democrats are going to get a number of seats, like maybe 20 or 30 seats to win the majority in the House, which will be a big thing. Uh, the Senate, everybody has questions about the Senate, but apparently the Republicans are worried about Donald Trump fucking up the Senate for them. You know, the Democrats have the majority now, a slim majority. I'm thinking not only can they maintain the majority in the Senate, they might even be able to expand it. And it goes back to what I said before. Donald Trump is not the only one that's going to pay the price for overturning Roe v. Wade. It'll be all those senators that support Donald Trump. You know, you have Rick Scott in Florida. Now, he's been elected a couple of times at least, and you might think that he'd get reelected. But consider this: if Florida is one of those states that could flip blue, that could vote against Donald Trump, one of the reasons they would vote against Donald Trump is because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the basic abortion ban in Florida. The thing is, the abortion issue is going to be on the ballot, and that's going to bring out a lot of Democrats, a lot of young people, and they're going to vote to make abortion legal. It's happened in every red state we've seen up to this point. It's going to happen in Florida. So now, if people are upset about Roe v. Wade and they decide not to vote for Donald Trump because of Roe v. Wade, would they still then vote for Rick Scott, who's a Trump humper, a Trumplafuck, who supports overturning Roe v. Wade? It seems to me if you're going to clean house, you're going to clean the fucker clean. You're going to get rid of all the shit. Maybe I'm pie in the sky guy here, but it just makes logical sense. Why would you not vote for Donald Trump and then vote for Rick Scott? And if you don't vote for Rick Scott, there's a possibility if the state of Florida turns blue or even gets close to turning blue, that Rick Scott might be in trouble. It seems to make perfect sense to me. So we'll see what happens. Over the next couple of months, we're going to see a lot of things happening, mostly positive for the Democrats, and the Republicans will continue to fail. They've been failing since the beginning of this campaign. Everything they do, everything they try, everything Donald Trump says works against them. I think Donald Trump will pay the price in a big way, and I think the down ballot people will be impacted too. And as much as some people say, we don't know about the Senate, the Republicans might get it back because of this, that, or the other thing. We're protecting 9 seats. They're only protecting 9 seats, and we've got a bunch of them. So odds would suggest that the Republicans would get it back. Well, maybe. You might say that based on what you've seen in history, but the fact of the matter is we've never seen history like what's happening now. The overturning of Roe v. Wade is a big deal to a lot of people, and that's going to impact how they vote come November. We don't know what's going to happen. And I prefer to look at the positive side. I prefer to look at logic and common sense. And common sense says to me that those down ballot people in the House and the Senate that support Donald Trump will go down the shitter with Donald Trump. That only makes sense. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. The second one I did fucking today. I don't know that this one was better or worse than the first one I did, but this is all we got. Tomorrow's a new day, and hopefully, Old Soul will be with us and we'll get back on track. Thanks for hanging with me today. Thanks for putting up with a second run at the podcast. I did what I could. Fucking 2 in the morning. I got to go to bed. But I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.